We have breaking news for you this afternoon. At least one person is dead after a shooting near an elementary school in Hillsborough County. It's primary night in South Carolina. Polls close at 7, and Nikki Haley is hoping for a long shot upset over Donald Trump in her home state. Trump has maintained a strong lead in the polls, but experts say Haley does have a chance to narrow that margin. Pinellas County deputies have a man in custody charged with killing 2 people late Friday night. Detectives took James Barber Jr. into custody this morning. He's facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. Many dream of being their own boss, but for some, funding that dream can be a huge challenge. This Black History Month, we're delving deeper into the financial hurdles African Americans face when starting their own business. Baseball is back in the Sunshine State. The 2024 spring training schedule got going today with games all across Florida, including our very own Tampa Bay Rays. The club hosted Atlanta down in Port Charlotte. That's where we find Spectrum Sports 360's Mike Karen. Mike, it is so good to be back and a beautiful day for the spring opener. It might not feel like it, but Thanksgiving is nearly here. The holiday is next week, and that means for the next 11 days, millions of people will be traveling. And thankfully, lawmakers passed a funding bill overnight, avoiding a shutdown that could have impacted TSA and federal air traffic controllers. About 80,000 passengers are expected to travel each day, and there are a few things you need to know before you fly out. Our Angie Andrews is at Tampa International Airport with more. In your destination space news tonight, it's time for another SpaceX Starlink launch. The Falcon 9 rocket is carrying more satellites into orbit. Let's listen in live. Cyber attacks on hospitals are on the rise. There were 46 attacks last year compared to 25 the year before. That's according to the cybersecurity firm NCSoft. Their data shows the average payout for a cyber attack was $5,000 in 2018. It jumped to $1.5 million last year. Good evening, I'm Cait McVey. This is your Spectrum News in 90 Update. Clearwater Police and Fire Rescue say a 4-year-old boy is in the hospital after being hit by a car. The incident happened on Gulfview Boulevard around 10 this morning. They say the boy suffered critical injuries. Officials tell us the driver did stay on the scene after the crash. Their investigation continues. AT&T is reimbursing customers for Thursday's network outage. Tens of thousands of users dealt with error messages or no service connection throughout the day. The company plans to issue a $5 credit to potentially impacted wireless customers, which it says is the average cost of a full day of service. The Federal Communications Commission is also investigating. Governor Ron DeSantis says he has no plans of being Donald Trump's or anybody else's running mate. He made the comments on a call with supporters. DeSantis, who recently suspended his own campaign for president, had been on a list of Trump's potential VP picks. On that call, DeSantis didn't rule out another run in 2028. 13 straight wins and counting for USF men's basketball. The Bulls knocked off SMU today at the Yuengling Center 79-68. USF has 3 games left before the conference tournament and then maybe a spot in the big dance. That was your news. Now let's check on weather with our Diane Kashmerick. Diane, I love the warm weather in the forecast. Now for the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. Israel is considering a proposal that would call for the release of at least 50 hostages. More than 200 are still being held by the terrorist group Hamas in Gaza. This as President Joe Biden defends Israel's latest raid on Gaza's main hospital, condemning Hamas for using the hospital as a space to plan attacks. Turning to Tallahassee now, the biggest development we saw this week was with House Bill 1. That's the bill to block kids under 16 from social media. It's now one step closer to the governor's desk, but still, it's unclear if he will sign it. Here's where things stand. The bill still has to clear the Senate, but lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have concerns about the bill. Developing this afternoon, embattled New York Congressman George Santos won't seek re-election. This after a House Ethics Committee released a scathing report on him detailing, quote, potential violations of federal criminal law. However, the report fell short of recommending he be expelled from the House. The report says there is substantial evidence Santos filed false reports and used campaign funds for personal purposes. The committee says Santos's conduct warrants public condemnation, is beneath the dignity of the office, and has brought severe discredit upon the House. Santos has denied the allegations. The team says with their technology, AI can make that initial autism diagnosis, potentially reducing specialist workload by as much as 30%. That does it for this hour on Spectrum Bay News 9. Stay with us for your top stories of the day, including a look at today's Gasparilla Distance Classic. We'll be right back. Thank you so much for joining us on Spectrum Bay News 9. I'm Cait McVey. This is your news weather now. Our top story tonight, millions of Americans are at risk of eviction, some in a matter of days. The CDC's moratorium on evictions expires at midnight after lawmakers in Washington, D.C. failed to pass a bill to extend the deadline. This means for the first time in a year and a half, there is nothing stopping evictions from happening. Out of Polk County, where Sheriff Grady Judd is updating us on a shooting that happened early this morning, leaving 4 dead. Let's take a listen.
Assistant Chief of Police.
All right, that wraps up the news conference with Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, who just went over all of the details they know so far in that shooting this morning in Lakeland that left 4 dead, including, we just learned, a 3-month-old infant. The details here extremely disturbing. To recap, the sheriff says the suspect, 33-year-old Brian Riley of Brandon, went on a shooting rampage at a home on Skookum Loop Road. Deputies arrived after a lieutenant in the area heard gunshots. Law enforcement ultimately exchanged dozens, if not hundreds, of rounds with Riley, who Sheriff Judd says was dressed head to toe in camo with a bulletproof vest on. Judd says Riley was shot once and eventually surrendered. Inside the home, deputies found an 11-year-old shot at least 7 times. She was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, 3 adults and a baby were also shot. They did not survive. Sheriff Judd says it was apparent all of those victims had been huddling and hiding in fear at the time of the shooting. Again, the details of this case so very disturbing. We've learned alleged shooter Brian Riley is a former Marine who served tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan as a sharpshooter. Sheriff Judd says Riley had absolutely no connections to the victims in this case. As for motive, it's not entirely clear either, but Judd says mental health issues were likely at play. We do have a crew out in Polk County working to sift through all of this information, and we will, of course, bring you the very latest at 5 tonight. This week, President Joe Biden and Democrats agreed to lower the $3.5 trillion spending package to more in the range of $2 trillion in an effort to get all Democrats on board after some infighting over that price tag for months. Joining me now, former State Representative Ed Narain. Ed, both progressives and moderates here starting to realize maybe they're not going to get everything they want out of this. What are your thoughts on some of the major things expected to be cut in the spirit of compromise?
Well, I always think that compromise is a good thing.
When we talk about some of those social safety net programs, I do have to point out free community college is likely going to be dropped. Affordable housing and funding to increase home care for the elderly could also be scaled back. What are your thoughts on that? Because those are things that directly impact people here in our region.
Absolutely. I mean, these were things that the progressive wing of the party really wanted to see happen.
Right, thank you so much, Ed, for all of those insights. We really appreciate the time you took to speak with us today. The Gators are back in the Swamp tonight for their first game of the season, and fans all over Florida are ready to get back in the stands. Let's go to Spectrum Sports 360's Catherine Smith live in Gainesville. Kat, I can hear the fun being had out there. How excited are these fans right now?
Well, the fans right behind me are very excited. They are in regular season. I can't wait to see the Swamp filled tonight and hear how loud it can get.
That's right, and I hope that energy carries them through to a win tonight. Thank you so much, Catherine. All right, before we head to the commercial break, let's get another check of the weather with meteorologist Diane Kashmerek. Diane, what's in the forecast for the rest of this weekend? I'm hoping more sun, less rain.
Yeah, you are right, because...
Welcome back. Seeing all 30 of the Major League Baseball stadiums is a feat some people want to accomplish in their lifetime. but one Southwest Ohio man wants to do it in just 30 days. Spectrum Bay News 9's Katie Capusta takes us on his journey to see how he's making it happen. New developments tonight. Benjamin Netanyahu could be out as Israeli prime minister. The new Right Party announced it would join other opposition parties in a coalition to remove him. The coalition has until Wednesday night to reach an agreement and to present it to Israeli President Reuven Rivlin. The Israeli parliament would need to endorse it as well. Netanyahu is Israel's longest-serving prime minister, having held the position for 12 years. The next election for Israel will be held in 2025. Police are looking for the people who opened fire at a Florida club, killing at least 2 people and wounding at least 20 more. Our Melissa Rainey reports there's now growing concern of increased violence nationwide. I'm here with Spectrum Bay News 9 executive producer Nathaniel Paul. He's also the host of our Justice for All Beyond the Cut segment. Nate, this is your 5th episode. Normally, you're dealing with adults, community leaders, and in this particular one, you're talking to children. Yep. Something you do often, we're parents. But I imagine the conversations you have are very different.
Very, very different.
Thank you so much for joining us on Spectrum Bay News 9. This is your news, weather, now. And before we get to our top stories, let's go to meteorologist Diane Kashmerek live in the Weather Center. Diane, Hurricane Ida far to our west, but will we feel any impacts here?
You know, probably the breeze that we have out there now, Kate, is about as much as we're going to see.
New developments out of Afghanistan. President Joe Biden released a statement today following his meeting with his national security team, as well as commanders out in the field. The president said last night's drone strike in Afghanistan was not the last. He said, quote, "We will continue to hunt down any person involved in that heinous attack and make them pay. Whenever anyone seeks to harm the United States or attack our troops, we will respond." The remains of the 13 U.S. service members killed in the terrorist attack outside the Kabul airport are being transported back to the United States. More than 170 other people were killed in the suicide bombing on Thursday. John Lawrence reports on the latest. Well, it's been more than 5 decades since Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a civil rights movement on Washington, D.C. Thousands flocked to the nation's capital today to continue that fight for equality. This hour of news and weather is about to end, but before it does, we want to share something with you to make you smile. An Iowa man has a new business partner, and better yet, he's a man's best friend. Chris James recently opened Buffalo Brew Coffee Roasting. Once an order is bagged and ready to go, he hops on his bike to make a delivery. And right alongside him, his 11-year-old pug, Sushi. She has difficulty moving her hind legs and is also blind. This new partnership, however, is a way James gets her out and into the fresh air. James says his customers have even taken a liking to the strapped-in helmet and goggle-wearing bundle of joy. How cute is that? We hope that story made you smile. Stay with us here on Spectrum Bay News 9. Your top stories and weather on the 9s are coming up in a few at the top of the hour. We'll see you then.